pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for January 23rd, 2018, Friday. We had Jonathan on the line, on the floor of the MLS draft. It was an interesting moment, especially when the PR of the Philadelphia Communications were right there saying no comments, and then the trade happened. Jonathan, a little less busy Tuesday morning, but how are you today?
Only a little less. There's some other sports going on in this town at the moment that you might have heard about.
Yeah, there was a pole and a guy running towards it. It was a busy Sunday in Philly.
He apparently told some of the local media that he's doing just fine, which is good to hear. But I'm not sure that's how I personally would spend my time on a subway platform, but that's just me.
There you go, John. You're doing any Super Bowl work? Are they getting thrown all hands on deck, or are you?
It is all hands on deck and then some.
All right, fair enough. And exciting week there although I think that Philadelphia fans might be up for. I hate the Patriots like any good human being out there on earth, but they have to be the favorite on this one. Ask anyone in Jacksonville what Tom Brady can do in the fourth quarter. But this isn't a football podcast. Let's stick to soccer. There's a lot of news that happened.
It's a football podcast, a real football podcast.
It is a football podcast. And it does say here that there's a story on A1 of the Inquirer this morning about how the Eagles are becoming America's team because everybody hates the Patriots.
Well, as a fan of America's team, I'll take some issue with that, but maybe on another day. I'm sorry, Philadelphia listeners, for that. Jonathan, let's get back to the other football, to the soccer, and talk about your busy weekend. It all started with a massive trade in the NWSL draft, and then we had another trade in the NWSL. It seemed to me that in the NWSL, those big names are far more likely to move. Is that just a product of where the women's game is right now, that the large names, the big names, the stars move from team to team a little more frequently that you see in the men's side?
Well, they have some power. They have, honest to goodness, player power in that league. The national team stars, and if you believe in the labor side of things, and players ought to be able to have a little more of a say in where they play, then that's probably not a bad thing. It sounds like Sam Kerr wanted to get out of Sky Blue. It's very clear that Carly Lloyd wanted to come home to New Jersey. She told me that. And interestingly, the player in the oddest situation is Kristen Press, who I'm not really sure wants to be in Houston, but has given some guarantees that she's going to stay there for a year. And look, I think very highly of the new Dash coach, Vera Pauw. I did before last week, and then I got to meet her at the coaches convention and spent some time talking to her. And I think she's going to do a very good job there, and she's going to build that team around Kristen Press, and we'll see how it does.
Jonathan, the women, of course, played a friendly this week. The U20s are in qualifying. I know that it's hard to keep track of the U20s with everything else that's going on. I'll be watching it for everyone else, I think, this week. But a lot of sort of news there. And I increasingly see something. This is more of a big picture question. I increasingly see a divide between the women's fans and the men's fans, particularly as it relates to sort of the ongoing drama in American
I wonder why. I wonder why, and let me state for the record that since I'm on the clock and in my newsroom, I'd better watch what I say.
Okay.
It extends beyond soccer, let's put it that way.
Yes, exactly. I follow you that. You were there at the convention. Is there enough attention being paid to the women? No. Okay, go on. Expand on that. Why?
Has there ever been? Save for during the World Cup and maybe during the Olympics? No, the answer is always no. A couple anecdotes that I'll share. First of all, before Sunday night, the day of the trade. Now, I do social media stuff in my newsroom. I pay very close attention to our analytics and so on. The I broke the trade story, as your listeners probably know. And in fact, one of your listeners who's in Montreal, Kevin, tweeted to me, I'm amazed at how much response this thing has gotten on Twitter, the enormous number of retweets, likes, replies, so on. And I said back, that is the star power of these players. That is how big deals these players are. And nobody has figured out how to monetize it yet. But I had people in my newsroom saying, I'm amazed at the pickup your story did on search of social media. And I said, look, the numbers are huge. I'm floored by them. But I'm not surprised that the interest is there, because it is there and it's been there, and it's simply a matter of it hasn't really been catered to all that much. Now, obviously, it's a different story when you're talking about Sam Kerr and Kristen Press and Carly Lloyd instead of all the other, with all due respect to Janine Becky, who's a very good player. She's not, in terms of star power, she's not the other three, nor are Nikki Stanton and Jen Hoy, who are also in the trade, nor, of course, were all the draft picks that were swapped around. But still, there's something there. And then on Sunday night, Julie Ertz was playing for the U.S. women's soccer team at the same time that Zach Ertz was playing for the Eagles. And Julie was in San Diego and Zach was in Philadelphia. And I was able at around, 10:15, 10:30, sometime in the 10 o'clock hour on Sunday night, I was able to get Julie Ertz on the phone for a story about, her reaction to Zach going to the Super Bowl, because there had been a video that had gone viral of her being told of the news, and she's a huge Eagles fan. She goes to all the games when she's here, and so on and so forth. And Zach's obviously a big soccer guy, and follows the U.S. women devotedly. And that, took off like a rocket ship in terms of interest and traffic and going viral and so on. And I had people say to me, how cool that was. And I said, A, I can do that because I know all these people. And B, that's what these athletes are. They are rock stars. And I think even some of us who work in soccer don't really even understand how big of a deal they are, including the three of us who follow women's soccer pretty closely. I don't think even we know how just huge they are. But in terms of whether the soccer community is paying enough attention, I'll give you this example. On Saturday in the late afternoon, the last seminar that I went to at the coaches convention was hosted by BJ Snow, who's the director of talent identification for the U.S. women's national team program. And he was talking about what traits go into scouting players, what sorts of things they look for, how they judge a striker, a number 10, a winger, an outside back, a center back, etc. You'd be interested, Duane, to know, by the way, that they're very interested in the way Manchester City plays tactically with emphasis on pressing in the wings and all that stuff. And it was very effective against Denmark. Although you might not agree with the central premise that attacking down the wings with a high press is the way to do everything. There were maybe 20 people at that seminar. Maybe. I was surprised. I thought there should have been a lot more, because that is a pretty big deal subject, especially going into this is a World Cup qualifying year, and then next year might be, the biggest in terms of spotlight and profile women's World Cup of all time.
Jonathan, if you go back to a few months ago, the North American soccer reporters, that you are now president of, wrote a manifesto, or at least a public comment saying we're taking responsibility and we're taking a pledge to talk more about NWSL. I agree about the women's game as well. And I want to ask you, how should we proceed going forward? What is the best way to approach it? It's a soccer, it's a sport. We should cover just as a sport, but we have a responsibility. I believe that you mentioned it wasn't catered to, and I have a feeling that it is a bit of our fault. And when I say our fault, I say media with the capital M. It's like a spark, and that spark needs to be fed some oxygen and some wood to make sure it keeps growing as a fire. So going forward, Jonathan, what should we do?
Well, a couple things. First of all, that statement that you mentioned, and I thank you for mentioning it, was issued jointly with the National Women's Soccer League Media Association, of which I'm also a member, in specific regard to the U.S. Soccer Federation presidential election race and the fact that women's soccer was really not being talked about all that much in it. That has started to change. I'm still not sure it's all the way where people think it should be, but it is there's been some movement, and certainly Hope Solo being in the race has kicked that in the pants a little bit. I think Kyle Martino has also tried to move the ball some in that regard. What can we do in the media? Well, I mean, look, if you are not in an NWSL market, and I am not, obviously I try to cover the athletes from where I am, who are in the league, and write stories about them. I know Carly Lloyd fairly well at this point. That helps. I know Julie Ertz somewhat well at this point, and she spends some of her time here when she's not in Chicago. But I think the answer to the question that I would give is this. You mentioned, obviously, treating it as soccer, and that, whether it's soccer or basketball or track and field or tennis or whatever, it's not about the modifier of who plays it. It's simply the sport, regardless of who plays it. That's how I've always treated it, and how hopefully I always will. But I think it's our job to ask questions of the people in power, saying, what are you guys doing to help make the situation better? And in this regard, fellas, I come to your country and its national federation.
Yeah. I'm just happy my province is getting a league this year. The PLSQ women will be starting, and that's at least a positive.
Good news.
Yeah, exactly.
But your former women's national team coach ought to have a few things to say in this regard, and I get the impression that he's a little bit. May I get away with saying he's making it about him a little bit right now and not about the game?
Yeah, let's be fair and you say yes.
Jonathan, you can't criticize the St. John Herdman in this country without getting yelled at. So
is it St. John or St. John's? Depends which province he's in, right? Canadian geography.
I noticed something this morning, and in fact, this does relate to John Herdman, and it brings us to the news of the morning. Ballou's out of Montreal.
Yeah,
he's going to leave. Adam Braz admitted that he's going to leave.
Yeah,
and he hasn't played for Canada yet. I haven't seen any signs that he's going to play for Canada.
Well, he won't. He played under 20, and he was really good, and he scored against
I wonder
England,
what the men's national team head coach has to say on this regard. I wonder if Octavio Zambrano has anything to say on the subject, since he seemed from far, at least, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, he seemed to be trying to recruit Ballou to the Canadian side of things. And I wondered what the men's national Excel director, not that I know exactly what that does, but since that's also John Herdman, I wonder what he has to say about it.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think for Zambrano, I think there was a lot of people were wondering, oh, it seems like he's doing a good job, but even the people working close to him were only seeming to see what he was doing. But that's something else for Zambrano. I just want to ask you, Jonathan, as well, is now you mentioned the Ballou, and you mentioned young kids, young players that are not happy now, and there's a new young player that's happy about his move, and he got traded live on the show on Friday, and now a Philadelphia Union member, David Accam. Is this
he got traded live on the show on Friday is a heck of a phrase, by the way.
Thank you. So, is it the biggest trade in the union's history?
Oh yes, absolutely. Now, even if you believe that allocation money is monopoly money, I wasn't going to, in the story that I wrote for our papers on the trade, I wasn't going to say, well, it's $1.2 million in allocation to money divided into 4 different pots that are spread over 3.5 years. And if he gets sold here, in this year or that year, X percent of the fee goes to all that. No. The union paid a $1.2 million transfer fee for David Accam. And we are seeing more and more that teams are trading amounts of allocation money that resemble decent transfer fees in order to get players. That's not a bad thing. And hopefully as MLS loosens the reins more and more, we'll see more and more of this. It's a transfer with a transfer fee. Wasn't a player trade, whatever else. What's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it, and I think it's the future to do in MLS. And if you're looking at the teams themselves, they feel they can keep more of the value. We always talk about value in a salary cap league, and let's put it clear for the listeners that are not aware of this. When you do a in-league transfer or a trade for allocation money or for whatever kind of allocation, targeted, general, whatever, you keep 100% of that money. It doesn't go through MLS and they keep a percentage and then give you a guideline of where you can spend that money. Yes, if it's GAM and TAM, but you're free to use all that 300 and that 900 in that GAM and TAM, and you don't have there's no loss of value. When you sell a player out of the league, outside, there's a fee from MLS, and there's a certain amount of guidelines that you have to follow on how you can spend that money. Some of them has to be on infrastructure, some of them has to be a bit on your roster, but majority of it doesn't go on the roster. So for
that fee from MLS has to go, by the way.
Yes, that's true. But how important is that value that Philadelphia keeps? That's how I'm wondering. Is we're seeing the amount of allocation. We're seeing trade, like the Dwyer trade was the first one probably to use that model. David Beckham is another very high profile one. What is Philly, or on this case is Chicago getting that money? But with David Beckham, what can Philly do now with that value they got? How can they get the most out of David Beckham in the next few years, or if not just this year?
Well, he's a starting winger, first of all. That's the obvious part. He makes their team better, which is what they needed. When you're the 7th or 8th or 9th place team in the East, not only do you have to get better, but you have to get better faster and to a greater degree than 4 or 5 of the teams in front of you so that you can go make the playoffs. The Union needed to do that, and this will help. Will it get them all the way there? I don't know. Now, here's an interesting question to me. The Fire are going to take this money and put it in the bank, and what are they going to do with it? If they go out and sign Juan Quintero or some other very good player who's better than what the Union could afford, I might sit here and say, well, the Union, traded for David Beckham, but then the Fire, were smarter about it, went out and got a better player. Why didn't the Union go out and get a better player? And the answer is because they weren't willing to spend the money. Duane, I have a question for you.
Sure.
We were talking a moment ago about the problems with MLS taking a cut of the transfer fee when a player gets sold out of the league, which is about to happen with Jack Harrison going to Stoke. I wonder if he had gone to Manchester, certainly the blue half of Manchester, do you think UEFA would have raised an eyebrow?
Certainly, I think there have been a lot of questions regarding financial fair play and the City Football Group's holdings, for sure. And this is something that has been thrashed out a lot and has been investigated. They would raise an eyebrow to ensure that that the transfer fee that was paid was of the market rate. There have been, similar sort of investigations in the past. There haven't really been many direct transfers between the teams just yet. The loans are a bit different, but yeah, for sure they would have raised a question there. Jonathan, just real quickly, we have about a minute left. I want to get your thoughts on the Kyle Lawrence situation. Images just emerged moments ago of him training with Besiktas. This is getting messier and messier. We have about 1 minute. What are your general thoughts on the Kyle Lawrence saga right now?
Fix it. I don't know how. Obviously, it's making Orlando look pretty bad. Laren's not looking great either.
Yeah.
But fix the problem and be done with it.
Yeah.
He's gone. Everybody knows he's gone. Just do it.
Fair enough.
It's a
All right,
difficult
Orlando
situation.
seems to be digging the heels in, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation too, because we all knew it. It's been a year and a half. We know Laren's going to be sold in January 2018 because of how the contract was laid and how the amount of money that Orlando gets. It's more, there's a bigger percentage this year than it was last year, and it's bigger now than it would be next year. So it kind of makes sense, but it's a power play. It's a negotiation tactics out in the open. It's someone thinking they have leverage and trying to use that leverage, but both sides thinks they have that leverage. So it's going to get ugly. It's going to get litigated. I think there's going to be some lawsuits. There's going to be some lawyers, and we might not even know how it ends before the season starts. I'm thinking about the Turkish season.
Yeah. I just sell him. This, I think, is the next big frontier in MLS. We've all been talking about it for months now. Even Don Garber mentioned in the wake of the U.S., failing you in World Cup qualifying, that it could have a beneficial impact on the U.S. national team if MLS teams are more willing to sell players sooner. Sell them. Maybe you don't get every cent of what you want this time around, but the next time, once you establish good working relationships with, with these teams that you sell to, you'll have a better chance of selling for more money the next time. I'm looking up something real quick that Darren Eales told me here. Darren Eales was speaking with me and a few other reporters at the Super Draft, and he was speaking about how the virtues of selling and about the ability to recruit this elite South American talent like Miguel Almiron and Ezequiel Barco, recruit them to Atlanta on the premise that they can then be sold on to Europe, that MLS can be their launching pad. He said, when Atlanta United first started, our vision was to take younger players rather than designated players at the end of their career. And I think, look, it's a fact of life. It was said about selling. Let me put the caveat, though, that it will only be at the time that is right for the player, that's right for the club, and that's right for the league. But look, we're in a global game. This is how it works. I used to joke with Arthur Blank, our owner, and say every club is a selling club except for Barcelona. But we saw that with Neymar. They are too. This is the reality of the football landscape. You could attract top talent, and if you could then move them on, then that's good for everybody because you can reinvest those funds to get that next young player. I think with Miguel Almiron in particular, I think that was a factor. I know that the union want to develop players to the point where they can sell them. That is their intended financial model, and it's going to get to the point relatively soon, I think, where they start selling. But the league, as an entity, the headquarters and so on, they need to be more open to this. And the GMs and the owners who want to sell more need to help get that over the line, and I hope they do.
Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can follow Jonathan on his soccer account at the Goalkeeper. Jonathan, thank you very much for your time once again.
Pleasure, fellas, as always.
We'll be right back after the break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins on the line with myself, Kevin Laramee. It's our pleasure to be joined by Jon Arnold this morning of Goal.com covering Liga MX. We're in the third week of the Clausura. And John, it's difficult for Duane and I with all the soccer of Canada, United States, and the different leagues, different divisions to follow everything. But we know that you're the best at it. So good morning, John.
Hey, morning. How you guys doing?
Good, Jonathan. I'm basically what Kevin just said there is we're going to make an effort. It's part of our New Year's resolution to cover more Mexican club football, particularly with the CCL coming up. So we're going to start with a real basic question to you. If you're a newbie to following the Mexican game, what are the sort of overarching storylines in the season right now? What should fans that are sort of jumping in with 2 feet be looking for and following in the season ahead?
Yeah, definitely. In Mexico, there's a sort of over attention paid to the four grandes, the four biggest historical clubs. Those aren't the biggest teams anymore necessarily, but it's Chivas, America, Pumas, and Cruz Azul. All four of those teams have actually started pretty well, so the Mexican press is talking about that quite a bit. Pumas is actually on top of the table after finishing dead last season. I'm not so sure it'll continue, but they've had a really good start. Now, the balance of power has shifted away from those four clubs to the two teams in Monterrey and Tigres. They played for the final for the first time ever. The two teams met in the final last tournament in December. You might have seen Tigres won that. So they're still very powerful, but neither of those teams have really started off well. honestly, I think part of that might just be the fact that there was virtually no off season for those teams. I think they played. It was the same weekend as MLS Cup, so I don't remember. You guys in Toronto might remember exactly the date, but I think it was like the second week of December, and then they were back to training before Christmas. So there was really no break for the players. I think there's a lot of tired legs, and maybe once they get in rhythm, they'll be able to sort of reclaim their position at the top of the table. But for now, the all eyes are on the fact that, hey, maybe these four historically great teams aren't losing as much ground to the Monterrey teams as we thought. We'll see if that holds true once the rest of the season is complete. But through 3 weeks, it looks like the old guard is sort of striking back.
If you look at the CCL draw, and here in Canada and here in Toronto especially, there's a lot of attention being placed on that and the possibility of TFC drawing a Mexican team, provided they get past Colorado. It looks like it would be Tigres, you would assume, assuming they get past the Costa Rican side they're playing in that quarterfinal. Can you tell us a little bit about Tigres and what kind of challenge that would pose to a TFC team?
Absolutely. Tigres is coached by Tuca Ferretti, who is the anomaly among Mexican managers, and the fact that he's had his job for a really long time. He's the longest tenured manager there. He has a very particular style. Tigres love to control the ball. They love to keep possession. They don't make dangerous passes. They just want to keep the ball, try and attack, kind of probe down one side. If there's nothing there, all right, we'll recycle, maybe go back to the other side. It's a team that is owned by a giant cement company in Mexico and has a lot of money, not only bringing in players like Andre Pierre-Gignac, Javier Aquino, the Mexico international in recent years, but even signing sort of surplus players who I think fill depth roles that still would be starting in the majority of Mexican teams, the majority of Major League Soccer teams as well. So it's a team that's incredibly deep. It's also a team that has never won CCL before. Monterrey has won it several times. Tigres, as I just mentioned, huge rivals with Monterrey. They're crosstown rivals. It's about a 6 to 7 mile. Sorry, I don't know in kilometers. I guess that's what. You guys 10 or
14.
something.
Yeah, 10, 11.
So they're very close together. Very close together. So they've always wanted, I think, to win a CONCACAF Champions League. They'll take it very seriously. And it's a very deep and talented team. And like I said, I think it goes beyond some of the just big flashy names. There are players you've heard of. There are also players who they've brought in as depth options who we might see pop up in CCL who I still think are very talented. So it's a team that's going to be definitely looking for the CONCACAF Champions League, going to be taking, I think, more seriously than they have in past years with the format change, make it easier for teams to play their strongest side right away, to play good matches right away. They have a difficult test with the Costa Rica, with Arellano in this first round, but I think you'll see Tigres probably play a very strong side, move through. So it's a team to watch out for sure. And honestly, it's fun to watch. So if you do pop on and watch a few games, it's worth making them one of the teams you follow.
Always fun to watch Andre Pierre-Gignac play, and it's always been an idea of mine to take the Frenchman and bring to Montreal where it speaks French and use that francophone aspect to sign more French players. Andre Pierre-Gignac could have been one of those players, but he decided to join Mexico, and he's not the only quote-unquote foreigner or gringos to choose Mexico over the last few years. There's an influx of high-profile foreigners joining Liga MX over the last few years. Is it well accepted in Mexico? We know Liga MX is the training ground of literally thousands and thousands of great Mexican players, and there is a certain nationalistic view of their team that Mexican players should have the place to play and bloom and perform and develop. How is that influx of foreign players, high-profile one, has been dealt with over the last few years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Chivas, one of the other teams that's going to be in the CONCACAF Champions League, they still sign only Mexican players. It's a huge point of pride for fans of the club, and it's the most supported club in Mexico. So obviously on Chivas, you don't see any foreign players. But as you mentioned, a club like Tigres, they have Gignac. But what Mexico has done similar to MLS is, sort of rated. Even in Tigres, you have the goalkeeper Nahuel Guzman is an Argentine international. You have Eduardo Vargas from Chile. You have Ener Valencia from Ecuador. A few other players from Brazil, and Juninho and Rafael, the midfielder. So it's certainly it's happening whether fans want it to or not. There's always concern, as you mentioned, about, well, what's this doing to the Mexico national team? And I think we are seeing it affect El Tri in a negative way, because some of the players who maybe should test the waters abroad are not testing the waters because Mexico has this financial power. They can pay to keep these young players, but at the same time, they're not able to sort of win spots over the foreign players and that sort of thing. So you definitely see fans worried about it. It's happening whether they like it or not. So I'm not really sure that that anything can be done. But there is a bit of concern, I think, from Mexico fans that there are a lot of foreigners coming in. But look, if they want to compete on an international level with leagues like MLS that are growing, sort of with the same strategy, bring in young South American players for maybe not as much money who can contribute to teams on the field and developing homegrown talent as well, they're going to have to figure out something to be able to compete, because you can't just roll out Mexican players and hope it all turns out well.
Now,
well, you mentioned. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say one thing, John, as well. Another foreigner that joined Liga MX about 9 days ago, to the surprise of everyone, is Landon Donovan with Leon. I remember that 12:31 a.m. Eastern Time moment where I was looking at my Twitter feed, and you, including to all of us, were a bit puzzled. How have you dealt with that news, and how did that news get accepted by Leon and Liga MX fans?
It's funny because Landon Donovan is a player who, of course, as the captain of the United States national team for so long, has always been sort of this mythic figure to Mexico fans. But I wrote, and I believe, that they loved to hate him more than they actually hated him. I think he's always been this figure who he sort of plays along with the joke. He gets it, right? He understands that Mexico fans don't hate Landon Donovan as a human. They hate the idea of Landon Donovan as a U.S. national team player. Now he's come across, and look, I don't think it's going to work out very well on the field, and I think he knows it's going to take some time before he's able to get anywhere near the Leon starting 11, much less come off the bench. But he's come across and speaking in very good Spanish, saying things against Donald Trump, against the current political climate in the United States, bringing his family, his wife and 2 sons are moving with him, and he says, we're coming to live as Mexicans. We're not coming, to come and just collect a paycheck and I'm going to fly home and be in LA every weekend. No, we're coming to live here and integrate with the culture. I think that's helped a lot. It's a strange signing to me on the field. I don't think we're going to see a ton of minutes from Landon Donovan, but it seems like he's a very good community ambassador already if he can add a 10-minute appearance here, a 20-minute appearance here, and help boost the attack. I think it could be very popular. That remains up in the air, but I think his attitude and his comments and how he approached the signing and saying, hey, culturally, I understand that this is a weird thing, and I want to unite rather than try and divide. I think that's helped him be received well in Mexico. There's a lot of skepticism around how he can play. That's fair. I have the same skepticism as well, but I think as far as his sort of arrival as a person, as a human, I think it's been really well received.
I've wondered out loud whether this might not be part of the long-term strategy by Landon to sort of position himself so that he can get more Spanish media sort of appearances moving forward after he retires. Do you think this is partly him trying to integrate himself into Mexican culture, both Mexican American and Mexican culture, to sort of give him more opportunities moving forward?
I absolutely think so. I mean, when you look at his work with Fox Sports, he was already doing some stuff with Fox Deportes. I personally sort of did the same thing. I can't throw stones. I moved to Mexico, learned, I spoke Spanish, but learned better Spanish, started to understand the culture better, and that's benefited me greatly in my job. I think he sort of saw an opportunity. He said when he was first approached by the club, club came to his agent. He said, no way, I've been retired for a while. Like, what am I going to do? But I think the more he thought about those kinds of things, the business opportunities, the cultural opportunities, the opportunity to expand his brand, as sort of crass as it sounds, you guys know, money is a driving factor in everything. And I think it was a driving factor here, not only that he's making a pretty nice salary from Leon, that Leon is going to make back easily in merchandise sales and attention from the international press and that sort of thing, but also, like you said, for future things. I think his Spanish is going to improve. I think he's going to be, known by a group of fans that maybe didn't know about him, sort of a younger generation of fans that we see watching Liga MX, watching MLS, but they're watching on their phones, right? They're watching goal highlights. They're watching, crazy videos. They don't remember the Landon Donovan 5-10 years ago that we remember. Sorry, I know that makes us all feel old, but I think he's reaching new fans and new people, and I think that sort of future marketing prospect and job prospects and that sort of thing does play a huge role. I mean, I think it's a savvy move by Landon, honestly. It's weird still to me. I'm still stunned when he was out there training for his first session yesterday. It's still a little funny, but, he's being welcomed by everyone, it seems like. And I say it's harmless. If you're a Leon fan and you say, hey, he's taking up a roster spot, we're paying him too much money, yeah, I guess, but that spot was there already. If he's only playing in cameos and he's not, playing to the detriment of your team, which I don't think you would ever want. We'll see if he can get in fitness enough in the next month or so to make sure that doesn't happen. I say it's harmless enough, and it looks like everyone kind of stands to benefit off the field.
If we're looking at the last few years in Liga MX and talk about both the Apertura and the Clausura, we have teams like the Xolos in Tijuana that have tried to attract, and with some certain success, some American players. And there's teams that are trying to get a better footprint in the American market, being Mexican teams. But there's one big flaw, and we've seen this happen with the Landon Donovan signing with Leon last week, 2 weeks ago, is the lack of preparedness on Liga MX side when they're trying to do strides in the American market, but not ready with the English side of media, of requests, of demand, of websites, of social media. What does Liga MX need in the short-term future to be able to make that stride in the American markets that are trying to do to get those ratings to become who they want to become?
I think first of all, they have to realize that they have that issue. Not only is a club like Leon, a club that I've enjoyed working with in the past as a journalist, working with their PR staff, they simply don't have the manpower to deal with it, not only in English, but in Spanish. They don't have a website that works. I mean, that's unthinkable for an MLS team or a Premier League team or a La Liga team. But yet that's sort of seen as acceptable in Mexico. Some of the biggest clubs, Pumas, doesn't have a website that works in Spanish, not just Spanish and English. Teams like Xolos have taken a progressive attitude, and they have to, right? They're marketing in San Diego. They're fighting against the San Diego, they used to have an NFL team there, the LA market, they're fighting against those teams. They realize we have to have good social media presence. We have to have a website that works so fans know when the games are. But other clubs still don't have it. They haven't made that realization yet. I think the first thing is to realize or decide what they want, because if Liga MX wants to be what they are now and just wants to be that for 30 years, a decent league, maybe beats MLS and CONCACAF Champions League for now, and is able to sort of put a good product on the field and be loved by Mexican fans, they're fine. They're going to do that. But if they want to compete on an international level, if they want to continue being bigger than MLS, if they want to continue drawing players from Argentina, Colombia, Chile, if they want to continue attracting foreign imports like Andre Pierre-Gignac, like Landon Donovan, like Nicolas Gaetan, who may come to sign from Monterrey, you're going to have to keep growing and realize that the fans are operating in a different way now. We need you to have a website. We need you to have a Twitter, and maybe not just in Spanish, but in English too. We need you to have a YouTube channel. We need those things to work. We need you to interact with the international media. And those are things that in many clubs in Mexico aren't happening. Tijuana, Santos, Laguna, a few others are the exception. But for the most part, there's very much a mentality of, we're the biggest game in town. Why should we change? And the answer is, if you don't change and adapt now, you will no longer be the biggest game in town. If they don't realize that, we're going to keep seeing the same thing from Liga MX, and foreign fans are going to have difficulty adapting. And in today's market, if you have difficulty following a league, it's not worth your time. I mean, you guys know it. You're trying to get into the league as well. If there was an English landing page for the league, I think it would be much easier for Canadian and American fans to get involved. If there was a profile on Lucas Cavallini, the Canadian striker doing very well at Puebla right now, everyone would watch that in Canada. But when have you seen that? Teams don't realize right now that they have to adapt and change, and if they don't, I'm afraid that for Liga MX, a league that I've come to love and know many people working in, it's going to lose to MLS, and that could be good news for us on this side of the border. But I think it'd be a bit of a shame in the terms of the international landscape. It's a beautiful country. The league is a beautiful league. There's a lot of excitement. It's a lot of fun. But if they don't adapt and change, we're not going to see it grow.
Sorry, Duane, I just have to jump in quickly just to, you mentioned Lucas Cavallini, and I'm wondering, how is he doing at Puebla? How is it going? Our Canadian listeners are dying to learn about a Canadian striker.
Yeah, he's doing well. Puebla is a team that is historically very bad. This year has gotten off to a good start, beating Tigres, the reigning champion, in the first week. They also got a win this past weekend. Cavallini scored off of a header. It was a fine goal. I haven't seen a ton of them because, like I said, Puebla's historically bad. I usually don't put them in my rotation of games to watch, but I did see his goal this weekend, and he's getting minutes there. He's essentially the starter there, starting forward. He's been playing a 4-4-3 with a new coach, Enrique Meza, so he's been the point man there. He's getting service, and like I said, this past weekend he was able to convert. So I'll definitely keep a closer eye on him. But so far, it's been promising at Puebla from what I hear from folks around the club. They like having him there, and he's been a pretty important player for them, and is getting minutes and getting plenty of opportunities to score.
Just to add to sort of what you and Kevin were talking about a minute ago, if I want to watch the league here in Canada, I have to go to Reddit and close a lot of boxes. You know what I mean? Like I have to watch it on Reddit. So yeah,
Liga
I think that the
MX
fact
Live.
that there is,
like we need a Liga MX Live. Like we have MLS Live. I don't understand why that doesn't exist any. I know.
Well, and it would be huge
Right.
in the U.S. as well as Canada, and there was Univision had a Facebook Live where you could watch some of the games in English, and I think that worked well, but I'm not sure it worked well enough commercially for them to, sort of throw more resources at it. It's a difficult balance for them to get right. But if they don't try, and that was an Univision initiative. That was the network saying we got to do this. The league isn't driving that, and like you said, it's difficult to go, log on, find some sketchy stream, close a million windows, and worry about what your computer has. It would be amazing if they had some sort of product that out of the box, $10, $15, whatever, like MLS Live, but I don't think that anyone's even talking about that. The league hasn't realized that they're in a battle for eyeballs internationally, and until they do that, I think we're going to see a lot of the same things, and I think they're going to keep losing ground. Maybe they'll keep winning the CONCACAF Champions League for years and years and years, but eventually that's going to change because, as you all know, MLS keeps growing, keeps making big signings on the field, off the field. It's kind of finding his feet, and Liga MX won't be able to rely on this advantage it has of just sort of hierarchy, that it's been a bigger league for a long time and it has a lot of money. That's only going to take you so far.
This TFC team is the first one I've ever really thought has the chance to compete depth-wise with some of the Mexican teams. But we'll leave that well enough alone. We could talk all day about this, and hopefully we can get you on a little later on in the season to keep touching base with you. But I do want to touch base one last question with the national team. I'll try and sort of think what the mood is, or ask you what the mood is in Mexico, a few months out from a World Cup. What are the expectations? Is there fear that this is still that same round of 16 ceiling out there, or there's some thoughts that maybe we can take another advance and go a little bit further for the first time?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. I think the draw with Germany, Sweden, and South Korea has sort of tempered some of the expectations because, you have to get out of the group. And if you do, probably you're not going to beat Germany. And if you get out, you're probably facing Brazil in the next round. That fifth game that Mexico has never made it to outside of domestic soil, it seems like it's going to be very difficult, even more so because a lot of the European players, Héctor Moreno, the center back, Chicharito, of course, the forward, Diego Reyes, another defender, Miguel Layún, another defender. Those guys aren't getting minutes in Europe right now. I would say there's sort of a frustration maybe around the Mexico national team because those guys aren't getting minutes. People think that, this is a team that maybe has the talent to finally break through and get to that fifth game, get to that sort of next round. Mexico's players, Andrés Guardado, I've said on multiple occasions, no, we don't want to just get to the fifth game. We want to win the tournament. But to do that, you have to get to the fifth game, and Mexico hasn't been able to do that. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that's sort of the mood around right now. The players believe, Juan Carlos Osorio, the manager, believes, the fans skeptical.
All right. We got through this whole interview about Mexico, and we didn't talk once about Hernandez. But we'll leave that well enough alone. All right, John, where can people follow your work?
You can catch me on Twitter at Arnold, John. Just spell out comma, no H in John. I'm on goal.com. That's my main thing. I know it's difficult to get there if you're in Canada, but, it sounds like you're a creative guy, Duane, with your finding the streams and everything. I know you can figure it out.
There you go.
Thank you, John, for your time today. We'll be right back after the break to talk about soccer.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Some days, Duane, we don't know what to talk about. Today is not one of those days. Minute by minute, subjects and topics keep dropping out everywhere. Baloo, Laren. If it was yesterday, we just talked about Petrasso and all the other players. Safir Taider and Diallo, Edwards, Raitala, all presented to Montreal media yesterday. But this morning, there was a scrum with Adam Bryce, technical director of the Montreal Impact, a.k.a. the capologist, and the journalists were asking questions, and Baloo, what's Baloo? Yeah, Baloo's not here. Baloo won't be here. We're trying to find a way to transfer Baloo out. We're looking for suitors. We're negotiating with clubs now. So, Jean-Yves Balou Tabla, not with the Impact in 2018, and maybe never again.
No, but the sound of it, they're negotiating a permanent transfer, but the sound of it too, if you read between the lines, this came out of left field. We all thought that maybe.
Oh, he asked for a trade last year. We knew he asked for a trade last year. He wasn't happy with his playing minutes. He wasn't happy with how things were going on behind the scenes. Last year, he wasn't necessarily happy. And one thing, I've been covering Balou for about 3 years, right? FC Montreal time, and then we gone to MLS, and it changed. The happy-go-lucky Balou that I've come to learn and love, that he was at the beginning of the season last year, and he was when he was playing and having great success. Well, something happened during the season. Either promises to him weren't fulfilled, or one side or the other. I don't know. I'm not saying this to put blame. But the result is the player's not the same, and the player doesn't want to be here. And you know what I think about players who don't want to be here? It's fine. Go play somewhere else. We'll find another player to take your place, and all the best in your future endeavors. And I do wish Balou the best, because I still have a small percentage of hope that he chooses Canada. He won't, but maybe he will. But Balou Tabla, that's how I feel. He asked for a trade. He wasn't happy. He wasn't happy with the development. Wasn't happy with training sessions. He had Didier Drogba in his ears, and maybe Balou Tabla was told that you deserve better, and maybe he does. We'll see how it happens, but it's at that point, I think.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. In terms of the on the field for the Impact, I'm not sure it has much, forgive the pun, the inevitable pun. I don't think there's much impact this year, much effect, let's say,
influence
this year. Because I don't know how much he would have played again. Which begs the question whether this is going to be better for his career. Where is he going? Is he going to a league that's below MLS in terms of its quality so that he gets more playing time? That would be a sensible thing for him to do. But I don't think, based on the words that come out of his mouth and the things that are out there, that he would be doing that. I suspect this announcement's going to come out and it's going to be a somewhat larger club, probably a mid-level European club of some kind, or
like
perhaps
a championship. I would see him maybe go to, I don't know, like a Nottingham Forest, a team that's on the cusp of maybe battling for promotion to the Premier League, but not there yet. Mid-table in the championship, maybe closer to 7th, but that type of club.
Sure. The question I have with this is whether or not we might even see him go to a very big club, but then get immediately loaned from there. That because he has such hot upper end talent, he's not ready to compete at the highest level yet. He still has a development to do. So the idea, I have trouble seeing him going to a championship side and contributing right now. I really do. I think he'd be playing a similar role that he would be in Montreal. And I don't think that from what I'm reading, the fact that he sat out of practice, the fact that he's demanding to be moved, et cetera, and as you said, I think someone's in his ear that is suggesting to him that he's ready to excel, he's ready to fly at a high level. And I don't know. Maybe that's unfair. So I can't see him sensibly going, okay, maybe I'll go to a League One team or something like that, or a League Dual team or whatever, so that he goes somewhere where he can play. I think he wants to go to a big name, to a name that people will recognize, and he'd be happy playing under 23 minutes for them, playing for the
under 23 team. He could actually just play reserve, and maybe he's just going to be loaned out. Maybe he's going to be like, I don't know, like Matt Miazga and sign for Chelsea and then be loaned out forever. That could happen easily with a Baluta Blah. And we'll see. And I do wish Baluta Blah all the best. I always had an immense pleasure interviewing him, talking to him, trying to get something out of him. It was always a pleasure, and I do wish him the best for the future. And Balu, if you're listening, choose Canada, please. We definitely need you. Like, we really, really, really need you.
I would not fall down off my couch if Chelsea were the team that was linked to him.
Well,
because of the Drogba links.
It was. Last year, Chelsea was here to look at him. Chelsea was told by Drogba last year about Baluta, but it's actually 2 years ago when Drogba first got here. Like, those links are not out of nowhere. You remember when we first heard about Drogba coming to Montreal, how we thought, like, yeah, that's never going to happen? Well, guess what? It did. So I wouldn't be that surprised if Chelsea, one of the biggest club in the world that transfers players, that buys players, and loaned them. There are about 47 players loaned on any given day for Chelsea. So I wouldn't be surprised if Baluta Blah becomes one of those names just because of the high ceiling a young talent like him might have, and just because of the connections that he made playing with Drogba. It might sound trivial to you all, but you play with the man for a year and a half, train every day with him, become a friend. Drogba still comes to Montreal from time to time to hang out with his friends that he made at the club. He made personal friends for life while he was here, and Balu is one of them. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Balu gets transferred to Chelsea or somewhere else, but ends up at Chelsea or gets loaned out. But England, in my mind, and I might be wrong here, but I feel is a destination possible for Balu.
Well, you look at Drogba and we're guilty of overemphasizing that, but that connection is probably what opened doors.
But we're not.
The kid playing for.
Well, we're not.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what I'm hearing. It's even worse. Not worse because it's not necessarily negative to have Drogba on your side, but there's more influence than not, and it wasn't just Balu.
All right. Fair enough. We'll watch this with great interest. But in terms of what it means to the impact in 2018, I think it's relatively minor. Depends on what the transfer is. That could be the biggest, ultimately that will be, I believe, not even I believe, I know, is going to be the biggest influence Blue is going to have to the Montreal Impact on a scoreboard sense is the amount of money that he does bring in. And he's a young player with a high ceiling, so they might get a decent transfer out of this as well. And it's a good piece of business. And it sort of illustrates, and this is a good segue into the other thing that we need to talk about right now. It's a good indication, a good sort of example of how you need to know when to let go of young players so that you can then benefit your team long-term, unlike, say, a team in Orlando that does not seem to be willing to sell Kyle Larin despite promising him, and I know this on very good authority, he had been promised that he would be sold in this January window. They have taken this to in ways that aren't making them look particularly good. I don't think a lot of people in Orlando are probably burning their Kyle Larin jerseys at this point, but nonetheless, I think that the Lauren camp feels the need to force the issue, and force the issue they are. There's images that emerged while we were taping this show of him training with Besiktas, despite the fact that he is still under contract with Orlando. This reminds me, Kevin, when the year that I was doing beat writing for TFC, the biggest story that I was involved in, the only time I've ever appeared on Extra Time Radio was to talk about Duane de Rosario and his random vacation in Scotland when he was training with Celtic without the international training certificate along with it. This is a step even above that. He is training as a player with the Besiktas without having an ITC or having gone through a transfer certificate at this particular case. And that is something that could run them afoul. But I have to think a club like Besiktas is smart enough and knows enough to know what they can and can't get away with. We'll find out soon enough. Because when I think back to this, I don't know, there's probably a lot of people that aren't familiar with the D-Rose situation. So allow me just a second to explain what happened. When D-Rose made his famous check signing motion at the TFC final game of the home game of the season back in 2011, 2010, I get my years mixed up.
2011,
was demanding to get a renegotiated contract. He went he went to Celtic and trained with them in the offseason, looking maybe possibly get a move. He had never really played in Europe. He had a brief stint in Germany really early in his career. At this point in time, it was do or die. It was very near the end. In retrospect, hindsight, it probably would have been a bad move for him to go over there at that point because his career was beginning to go down, although the injury in Panama was probably what did him in finally and totally with the night the lights went out in D-Rose career and literally in the stadium. He went over to Celtic. He didn't have permission from TFC. They were getting conflicting information. TFC was saying they hadn't given permission. The D-Row camp was saying that he did have permission. And Celtic just suddenly threw their hands up and went, we're not touching this with a 10-foot pole, and told him not to train until they got the certificate. Eventually, TFC relented, wrote the training certificate, which is slightly different than a transfer certificate, obviously. It's just allowing a player to train with another team, and away he went. So the point I'm making with this is that I doubt Besiktas is going to flaunt the international FIFA rules to the point where they're going to get themselves sanctioned for a player like Kyle Laurent. So they have to believe that they have the ability to let him train with them right now in some capacity. So either we're not getting full information from the Orlando camp and they do have a training certificate or a transfer certificate ready to go, or there's some other legal interpretation happening with Lyon's contract, which makes Besiktas and the Lauren camp believe that he is no longer bound to Orlando. Either way, this is a mess, and I hopefully that something can get worked out, because I have this fear right now, worst case scenario, that this is going to get bogged down in some kind of legal procedure and that Kyle Lauren isn't going to play for 6 months. Let's hope that doesn't come to that. Let's hope that the two teams can just come to an agreement to transfer him there, because he clearly is never going to play in Major League Soccer again.
No, and it's either there was a promise that was in writing that wasn't kept, which would equal a breach of contract, which would make Kyle Lauren a free agent. There's that. There's either there was an agreement and then maybe there wasn't an agreement and then there was again, and maybe there was an agreement of principles and everybody went their way and the final paper wasn't signed and then they don't agree anymore. Maybe that. But in my mind, and I think in yours too, last few years ago, it's the 3-season Kyle Lauren spent in Major League Soccer. And after the first one, we already knew that he was going to move on eventually. We had two options that we were given by people in the know. Was January 2017 or January 2018? And the amount of transfer that Orlando would keep to themselves is a lot higher, about 15% higher this January than last January. So we all knew what's coming now. But more and more the day goes on without an official signing, agreement, transfer, whatever, well, the camp becomes antsy. Because you know what, we were told something and it's not happening, the clock is ticking and we have to get it done before the 31st because their window's closing. So there's a lot of hypothesis of what happened, but I'm pretty sure it's one of those options, one of those hypotheses that is actually happening, and both sides are being stubborn. And when I say both sides, I'm not saying Besiktas. I'm saying the Laren and agent side and Orlando and MLS side. Those two sides are being a bit stubborn right now. And, sometimes it's not about who's right, Duane. Do you want to be right or do you want to be a professional player? It's two different things.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of moving parts in this, and obviously we'll probably talk about this again tomorrow as this sort of evolves and breaks down. I can't imagine there not being some kind of response to an image of him training, because it's one thing to have a photo of him with a jersey on, in a doctor's office. It's quite another to have him kicking a ball,
insurance-wise,
at a training session.
Well, what if he gets injured? What if he breaks his leg and is out for 2 years while practicing for Besiktas in a litigation limbo like this right now? What are the insurance going to say? There's a lot of ramification to this, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it's interesting to see how it all unfolds. Like, if I'm an insurance company and I have to insure that players, I need to know where it stands. I need to know who's right, who's wrong, and if he's able to train. Does it mean he's actually injured? Does it mean Besiktas has more, they're more right, or they have the right side or the moral side on this thing? So, it goes deep.
For sure. All right, we're coming on to the hour. We do like to keep these things an hour at most, so we'll wrap for today. A couple quick housekeeping. If you're a Five Rings fan, the first preview was produced last night. You'll see it up soon. You'll see them sort of roll out over the next week as we're getting very close to the Pyeongchang games, I should say. Got some great K-pop in that too. The intro, you're going to really love it or hate me, one or the other. It depends how you're going to feel about that. But at any rate,
can I love it and still hate you? Like, I love the song. Still hate
love hate. That's the title of my autobiography that focuses on my dating life. Duane Rollins story, the love-hate relationship. Anyway,
how they hated to love me all those years.
If you enjoyed the Jon Arnold interview, and I did, and I think that it's a worthwhile thing to check in once a month or so on the Mexican League and have an expert sort of lead us through that. Let us know. We can crank that coverage up if you want, but just let us know what you thought about that. Other than that, I'm going to say goodbye and let Kevin, as always, say goodbye to you.
And if you like that coverage of Liga MX, we need more of your support, of your time. Let us know how much you liked it by giving us $1. Or $2, or $10, or $50. It's all up to you. But $1 a month goes a long way for the Sports Podcast Network. If everyone listens to this show actually gave 50 cents to $1 a month, well, Duane and I would be doing this full time with a bunch of other people we'll be hiring, and we will be talking about the biggest independent soccer coverage in the entire continent. And that can happen with your support. $1 a day goes a long way. You can follow Duane on Twitter. Well, that's patreon.com/sportspodcast network if you're wondering where to give us that $1. And it does go a long way. Thank you for your support over the years. Thanks to Jon Arnold, Jonathan Tannenwald for their time on the show today. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.